And they did that, I presented, and it was a wonderful thing. This is what it does. You can search by specific resolutions, paragraph, tables, footnotes, what you want, it will just give that. One company, multiple companies, one company, multiple years. So it's really very, very interesting. I'm going to leave after that. So this is the paper on assurance on XBRL instant document. It started with just curiosity. I teach auditing, and I have taught auditing with this conceptual framework, philosophy of auditing. Some of you may know about this book, Philosophy of Auditing by Mouse and Seraph. And it has such a rich theoretical framework that if you really see that book and the next 30, 40 years of audit practice, almost 100% of it comes from that philosophy of auditing. Well, the XBRL instant document is a true representation of electronic document filed with SEC. That is literally the concept what SEC wants, that it really represents the document that is filed with SEC. Here is literal definition what is there in the proposal. The tagged financial statements are accurate and consistent with the information the company presents in its traditional format filing. Well, they do not define what that consistent accuracy means. There was no definition of that. At least I didn't find it. I haven't read 156 pages or so. There was no definition. Not only that, they didn't define even the accounting profession, AICPA, PCOAB, and all that. They don't really define exactly what it is. So I was just curious what to do. Mostly in terms of the standard, how will you audit it, under what situation you can audit or provide assurance and all that, or objectivity and all, but no guidance. Here is a figure taken from Plumley and Plumley, simply talks about how the instant document is created. So you take the XBRL specimen 2.1, take the taxonomy, there is special taxonomy, take the financial statements, create the instant document, and then presentation tool, which is the SEC provided viewer, will make it look like as if it is the text document or ASCII estimate document. So that means if that looks similar to that, you're fine. And so this is the reason, no requirement to involve third party. They are arguing, and still I hear from some of you practitioners that the SEC says that, well, we do not want this instant document to be audited, but I think it is important for us to think about it and have it audited, even from the filer side, or helping the filers to tag these documents. We need to know what are we doing and how can we make sure that what we do is the right thing to do. So current approaches, well, PwC, I know some of my friends at PwC, they have done audit, given audit report on instant document. Well, we didn't get to their working papers, we didn't know exactly how they did it, but they have done it, they know what it is. Then Boris, I mentioned earlier, he did a mock audit. He took that same company data, instant document, and manually provided the audit, and just found out the issues and problems that he came across doing that. Of course, AICPA has a publication white paper on assurance services. Public Oversight Board has, through this question answer publication, what are the issues involved in assurance services, and then AWG. But none of them really provide a framework. What it is, in general, there is a lack of conceptual framework. It is similar to what the audit process used to be some 50, maybe even 60, 70 years back. I read somewhere in terms of, well, in those days, like 50s and 60s, when you're talking about what is an audit or audit process, a bunch of procedures. If you want to do inventory, these are the things you will do. If you want to perform audit for accounts receivable, these are things you will do. There was no framework, there is no conceptual thinking about it. Well, after the publication of Philosophy of Auditing by Mouse and Seraph, things changed. There is a framework, there is a conceptual framework that really helps you guide through the thought process. So when you say that, well, I'm going to perform audit of accounts receivable, what do I do? Well, look at the management assertion. You have existence, completeness, valuation, disclosures, and all that. So when you say, well, I want to see if accounts receivable fairly stated, well, I want to make sure that it does exist. Have they included all the accounts that should be there? Especially it is important for liability. Is it valued according to GAAP? Do they have right to use it and own its rights and obligations? So there are certain assertions, and then once you know the assertion, you collect the right kind of evidence.
When we considered possible risk scenarios, we decided to organize them around the structure of XBRL. When you have an XBRL instance document, there are three components to that XBRL instance document. There is actually data within the document. There is metadata within the instance document. And there is metadata outside the instance document. And actually, bad things can happen to all those three different components. So on this slide, you see examples of problems that can happen with the data within the XBRL instance document. Like what? Well, maybe you missed certain data elements present in the traditional format document, whether it is a text filing, HTML filing, PDF filing, doesn't really matter. So there is something there which is not in the XBRL instance document. And you'll see that the corresponding assertion we try to use to stay with traditional audit terminology as much as possible will be called completeness. So maybe you introduce something in the XBRL instance document which doesn't belong in there. That is a data element which is not present in the traditional format document. This will be an existence assertion. Maybe those two are fine, but the way you put them in the document is not exactly correct. And again, when you look at the structure of XBRL, those accuracy issues can affect either the so-called element value, the main thing which is tagged by XBRL, or the attribute values. Because when you have a tagged element within an XBRL document, it's not just the element value itself. What is also important is the attribute values. Okay. So what about metadata? Well, a lot of things can go wrong with metadata. Some of it is more significant than other things. Well, for example, it may be that you don't follow the basic rules of tagging. And the most basic rules are XML rules. XBRL is an XML-based format. And it may be that you don't follow the rules of XML. You violate it. For example, you don't close the tags. The case of the letters doesn't match. There are a lot of other things that XML requires that you have to follow. So those documents that follow basic XML rules are known as well-formed. So the assertion here will be the so-called well-formedness, formatness assertion. It's an awkward word, but evidently it is used in the literature. So another one is that it may be that the basic XML rules are fine, but this is an XBRL instance document, which refers to other things, for example, taxonomies and other rules of XBRL. And it may be that actually the document violates some of those rules. For example, you may use an element which requires, according to the XBRL rules, requires a certain attribute. And you don't include it in your instance document. That can be a problem. So you have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And by the way, those two are really easy. I start with this one. This is, by the way, what we call validity, because in XML domain, those documents which follow the specific rules are called valid documents. Finally, as far as the metadata within the instance document is concerned, maybe you didn't choose the right tags. You use the approved tags, and you don't really violate any syntactic rules of XBRL. But the semantics, the meaning of the tags that you used does not correspond to the information that you are tagging.